The Siberian vault, ice, fire, and the genesis of fear. There is a place on Earth where history does not merely fade or sink, but is frozen, a vast, indifferent wilderness that holds the keys to human genesis, the remnants of lost empires, and the silent code of extinction. That place is Siberia. For the American mind, Siberia is an abstract of snow and exile. Yet, for millennia, it has been the crucible of human migration, the silent stage for cosmic collisions, and a deep freeze vault for plagues that once reshaped the known world. It is the continent's colossal memory bank, where the distance between the last ice age and the 20th century is often measured in inches of permafrost. This is a journey into the heart of the Siberian mystery, exploring three profound historical facts: the bridge that founded the Americas, the pits that hold ancient disease, and the cosmic blast that defied science. Each one a terrifying echo of a world we thought we knew. Part 1. Beringia, the genesis of a continent. The land bridge that vanished. The most profound yet completely invisible lost territory connected to the American identity is not a mythical city, but a vast, drowned landmass, Beringia. Beringia was the colossal land bridge that once spanned the modern Bering Strait, connecting the easternmost tip of Siberia, Chukotka, to the westernmost extent of North America, Alaska. This was not a narrow causeway. During the peak of the last ice age, the last glacial maximum, LGM, so much of the Earth's water was locked up in massive continental ice sheets that global sea levels plummeted by up to 400 feet or 120 meters. When the sea retreated, it exposed a continuous tundra-like plain, roughly the size of British Columbia and Alberta combined. This was Beringia. The Ice Age Corridor. For tens of thousands of years, this land bridge served as a vast, migratory corridor. Contrary to popular belief, Beringia was not covered in ice. It existed because the ice sheets had drawn away the water. Its climate was a cold, dry Arctic steppe, supporting immense herds of Pleistocene megafauna, woolly mammoths, steppe bison, giant short-faced bears, and the ancestors of modern American reindeer. The story of Beringia is the story of how North America was populated. It is widely accepted that the ancestors of today's Native American peoples, often referred to as Paleo-Indians, migrated out of Asia and across Beringia. The timing of this migration remains one of the most hotly debated subjects in archaeology. The classic theory. Historically, scientists believed the migration occurred relatively quickly after the ice-free corridor opened, a temporary gap that formed between the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets, allowing passage southward roughly 13,000 years ago. The coastal route theory. Newer evidence, including genetic analysis and archaeology in South America, suggests a much earlier migration. Some humans may have arrived in Beringia as early as 30,000 years ago, surviving in the land bridge itself for thousands of years, the Beringian standstill hypothesis, and then moving south along the Pacific coast using boats, bypassing the slow-to-open interior ice corridor. The submerged archaeology. Today, Beringia is gone. It was submerged as the glaciers began to melt and sea levels rose rapidly between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago. The deepest secrets of the first Americans now lie beneath the shallow waters of the Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea. Modern archaeological investigations require complex, expensive marine geology. Scientists must use specialized coring devices to penetrate the seabed and retrieve ancient lakebed sediments that formed when the area was dry land. These sediments, which can date back 45,000 years, contain fossilized pollen, diatoms, algae, and environmental DNA, painting a picture of an ecosystem
far different from the traditional mammoth steppe. They reveal a landscape of permafrost bogs, small ponds, and crisscrossing rivers, a challenging but survivable environment that sustained the pioneering populations who would eventually become the founders of the entire New World. Beringia is the fundamental lost world of American history, a silent, deep-sea monument to the original act of human discovery.
Part 2. The Plague Vaults. Peter the Great's Lethal Legacy. The Ghost of the Black Death. If Beringia represents the ancient past, other parts of Siberia hold a more recent, yet far more terrifying historical secret: ancient pathogenic DNA frozen within the permafrost, a biological time bomb left by the Great Plagues of the Russian Empire. The plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, has ravaged humanity in 3 massive waves: the plague of Justinian, 6th century, the Black Death, 14th century, and the third pandemic, 19th century. The Black Death alone wiped out an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's population. Peter the Great's pits. In the early 18th century, Tsar Peter the Great drove Russia's modernization and expansion, but his ambitions were frequently derailed by disease, particularly a virulent strain of the bubonic plague that periodically swept through the sprawling, crowded cities of Western Russia and the new territories of Siberia. When plague outbreaks occurred, especially in the frontier settlements and military garrisons, the response was brutal and simple: mass graves. To prevent further spread, thousands of victims, sometimes entire communities, were quickly dumped into deep, communal plague pits, often doused with lime and covered quickly. In the icy northern reaches of Siberia, many of these pits were dug directly into the permafrost, the layer of ground that remains permanently frozen. These frozen plague pits were largely forgotten by history, simply existing as dark legends and vague records in church archives. The modern genetic excavation. Today, scientists are capable of retrieving and sequencing ancient DNA, aDNA, from human remains, particularly from the teeth of plague victims, where the bacterial DNA is often best preserved. This work has revolutionized our understanding of plague evolution. The virulence code. By sequencing aDNA from victims buried in these cold northern environments, scientists can reconstruct the full genome of the historical Yersinia pestis strain. This allows them to compare it to modern strains to understand what made the Black Death-era plague so devastating. Surprisingly, the ancient strain was not necessarily more virulent than today's. Rather, it suggests that the evolutionary pressure exerted by the plague actually changed the human immune system over centuries. The permafrost threat. The chilling realization is that global warming is a direct threat to these frozen historical vaults. As the Siberian permafrost melts at an accelerating rate, it exposes ancient layers of soil, often releasing long-dormant viruses and bacteria. In 2016, an anthrax outbreak in the Russian Arctic was directly linked to the melting permafrost, which exposed the carcass of a reindeer that had died of the disease decades earlier. This event confirmed the nightmare scenario. The plague pits of Peter the Great are not just historical artifacts, they are potential reservoirs for extinct, highly lethal pathogens that could be reintroduced into a human population with no historical immunity. Siberia's ice, which once preserved the ancient past, is now dissolving, raising the terrifying question of whether humanity is ready to face the biological ghosts of its own history. Part 3. The Tunguska Event, the Cosmic Unknown. The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1908. The third great Siberian mystery is not a forgotten migration or a buried plague, but an instantaneous, inexplicable cosmic event that remains the largest impact explosion in recorded history, the Tunguska event. On June 30th, 1908, at roughly 17:17 a.m. local time, a massive explosion occurred in the atmosphere high above the Podkamenya Tunguska River, deep in the desolate taiga of central Siberia. The effects were staggering. Destruction. The blast flattened an estimated 80 million trees across an area spanning over 830 square miles, or 2,150 square kilometers. The trees were all blown outward from a central point, creating a distinctive butterfly-shaped pattern of destruction. Eyewitnesses, local Evenki and Russian settlers, though few and far between, reported seeing a blinding blue-white fireball streaking across the sky, followed by an intense seismic shockwave. The heat blast was so powerful it stripped the bark and branches from trees near the center of the blast. People up to 40 miles away were thrown from their feet. Global effects. Seismic stations across Europe recorded the tremors. For several nights after the event, the skies over London, Paris, and even as far as the United States East Coast exhibited unusually bright, luminous clouds and brilliant sunsets, caused by the dust and gas ejected high into the atmosphere. The mystery of the missing crater. Despite the monumental destruction, the first scientific expedition, led by Soviet mineralogist Leonid Kulik in 1927, found the most peculiar aspect of the event. There was no crater. Kulik had expected to find a massive meteoric crater, but instead he found a bizarre scene. At the epicenter of the blast, the trees were scorched and stripped, but they remained standing upright, stripped bare like telephone poles. This indicated that the blast had originated high in the atmosphere, pushing the air straight down rather than the force originating from a ground impact. The lack of a meteoritic fragment or a crater fueled decades of wild speculation. Comet hypothesis. The most widely accepted theory today is that the blast was caused by a large, stony asteroid or a comet nucleus, a bolide, roughly 100 to 190 meters in diameter. Crucially, the object exploded in an airburst 3 to 6 miles above the ground, vaporizing completely before impact. A comet, being composed of ice and dust, would leave almost no traceable debris, explaining the lack of a crater. Alternative theories. The mystery gave rise to far more exotic ideas, including a black hole collision, an antimatter explosion, or even famously, the explosion of an alien spacecraft, a theory embraced by many for decades. The estimated power of the Tunguska explosion was equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, comparable to the largest thermonuclear weapons, yet caused by a cosmic rock. The only certainty is that had the blast occurred a few hours later, its rotation would have placed it directly over the populated city of St. Petersburg or another major European capital, changing the course of 20th century history entirely. Tunguska is Siberia's timeless warning. The most destructive forces are those from beyond our planet, waiting to strike without warning, leaving behind only flattened forests and an enduring scientific puzzle. Conclusion: the unconquered land. The Siberian Vault remains the world's greatest storage facility for history, mystery, and potential catastrophe. It is the land where the first North Americans made their final steps across a vanished continent, where the remnants of a centuries-old epidemic lie waiting in the melting ice,
and where a cosmic event demonstrated the fragility of civilization in the face of the universe's sheer, indifferent power. Siberia is the final frontier of discovery, not just because of its physical remoteness, but because the answers it holds, from the origins of the human story to the very fate of our planet, are simultaneously frozen in the past and poised to break into our future. It is the ultimate unconquered land, a silent reminder that some of the greatest forces shaping humanity lie buried, waiting in the deep freeze of the Russian East.